Hey folks, Damon at Black Warrior Lures. Just want to show you the sort of the evolution or micro evolution and development of how I started making these bobbers, these catfish bobbers, or the super sensitive floats, the mid-bodied floats that you see me using all the time. And so what happened is that my dad used to make floats. He used to make them out of cedar as a kid, and I just kind of grew up watching Dad make them. He would sit there on a Saturday afternoon and just carve and whittle away. I think he just liked them. They worked well. They were cigar-shaped, but very pointed at the ends. Very sensitive floats, and I remember how sensitive they were. He just didn't have a secure way of securing the float onto the line. So when I started, probably when I started fly tying, not too long after it, I started getting back into float fishing and live bait fishing. I decided, why not start trying to make my own floats again? And so I had looked at a lot of floats online, looked at a lot of places, and said, it seems that a lot of these floats have one thing: they're long and narrow. And so I bought some long, narrow sticks, wooden dowels, 1/4 inch, and just literally just painted the tip, and started fishing with them, securing them with rubber bands onto the float. And this is about 9 inches long. Securing them with rubber bands onto the line. This is about 9 inches long. Sharpen the ends in a simple pencil sharpener and fished them like that, and caught many bluegill just like that. And I noticed that the one thing I noticed is that the cocking weight, when you finally get enough weight on it to cock up, the only thing that sticks out of the water is that top little inch or two. So you got a 9-inch float, only 2 inches or above the water. How in the world are you going to see that from any real distance? So for short casts, this worked fine, but for long distances, especially when the wind is kicking up like now, and forgive the wind now, but I just couldn't see it. I just could not see the float. And so I decided, well, maybe what I really need is a longer float, right? And so I developed this thing. This is an old one. It's been sitting outside neglected, but you can see it's about twice the length, a little bit more than twice the length. About 18 inches long here, same 1/4 inch length, and went there, and somewhere between there and between this float and this float, I learned about slip floats. Okay, and so I got some little ring eyes and screwed them in, and then had the line coming down through here, but the same basic problem: if it tilted up, it would sink almost all the way down to the tip if you if you got the cocking weight correct. The better thing is because all I had was rubber bands, which was not really much better than Dad's system with old conduit insulation to secure it on there. The rubber bands would dry rot off and be worthless within a few days. Dad's system, the little conduits would pop off the ends, and it would, and it didn't have a secure way of doing it. But then I found out about slip floats, and that's where I made this thing. So what I found was that these pieces of wood are very dense. It's hard wood, so it doesn't float well by design. They're not designed to float well. So I needed a more buoyant material, so I went with a balsa. I just got a stick of balsa. This is 1/2 inch stick, and as you can see, I used a bunch of thread, and I got some wire from an old spinnerbait. A couple of wires from an old spinnerbait, rigged those up, caught the biggest largemouth bass in my life on this float right here. Just cast it out with a live bluegill under it, and bam, it really caught the largest on a circle. Well, it wasn't a circle hook, it was a double hook actually. Bluegill, and caught him on this one here. Now that stuck with me. I said, wow, these slip floats really do work. They're sensitive. You can adjust the depth. You can use a variety of baits on it, but you can see all the thread that I used here to try to secure that wire onto there, and I had no idea of how to form the wire, and therefore I had gone with the loops here. But with the loops here, I often split the wood in two. It wasn't exactly center, and it wasn't very strong, and sometimes it'll crack this in half, and it would weaken this whole unit. So I said, my gosh, I got to come up with something different. And once I got to about this point, I just quit making floats for several years. About 7 years ago, I kind of started making these floats, and after about a year or two, I just kind of quit, because I just couldn't make any more progress, couldn't figure anything else out. So I just kind of quit doing that I took up fly fishing and started doing a whole lot of fly fishing and lure making and learning how to make my own lures. Well, one of the great things about making your own lures, particularly, I'm doing the motion with to how to tie a whip finish on a fly. Learning how to tie your own flies, your own streamers, and your own artificial lures on a fly tying vise taught me one thing: thread control. It taught me how to tie knots, how to lash things, how to secure anything to a surface with lead, securing it with epoxy. I didn't know that before, and that's what I learned with fly fishing. And so I took that and applied it to the lures. And so after tying just thousands and thousands of flies, I figured, well, wait a minute. The process of securing a piece of wire here is not any different than securing some, hackle feathers to a hook, or securing, a tandem hook on a Mickey fin, a double tandem hooked Mickey fin or something. There's no difference. And the way you finish it off, no difference. It uses a similar whip finish and things like that. And so what I decided, after all that several years of tying lots of flies, let's come back to the float fishing and see what we can do. One of the things I noticed was that when I came back, I said, well, there's things that I like about each one of these floats. If we could just combine the attributes of every single one of these floats into one float, we'd have it, right? Hard, dense wood casts well because it has more mass, and it's narrow. It zips through the wind like an arrow. The problem is it doesn't float well. Balsa floats well, but it's so light it quite frankly doesn't cast well. So and every time I use the hardwood, it sinks all the way down to the tip. If we could just somehow combine this high buoyancy with the dense wood, maybe we could get something that floats exactly the way I thought. Because currently the slip rig works perfectly without any thing. So what I came up with was that, well, wait a minute. What if we went with a hardwood dowel, but instead of a 1/4 inch, let's go one size smaller to 3/16, so it makes it a little lighter, but still has plenty of mass to cast a long way. And what if we just went with wine corks? Just wine corks, and threaded them and just drilled it out and just, epoxied it, glued it onto the dowel itself, and then just use the wrapping techniques that we have with the fly tying to secure just a simple piece of wire, looped wire onto the end, and maybe we can do a decorative wrap like that to make it look cool. But other than that, that should work. And so I says, okay, great. This really might be able to work. But the question is, well, what position should the cork be in? After looking at a lot of, classic British floats, I found that a lot of the floats that seemed to work best for what I want was called a waggler float. A waggler float is a float where the line is only attached at the bottom of the float, whereas here I have it rigged here. And in the United States, it's for slip floats, guys doing catfishing, it's customary to have 2 eyes here. I don't like that. It's just more work to do to make it, and I don't feel that it adds any sensitivity. And it's a great deal, but I prefer to have the line coming through the bottom so that all that line is running just under the surface of the water. And I just think it cuts out some of the wind effects on the surface of the water, and therefore your line is straighter and you keep a little bit taller line to it. But anyway, the point is, where do you put the cork? So a lot of your waggler floats are rigged just like this, where the cork's way down here at the bottom. You have this long thread up top. So I said, well, let's try that. Then I learned about Avon, the floats that they use on the River Avon, where they have the cork way up at the top here. So I said, well, why don't we just put a cork at the top too, as well? And then I says, well, why don't we, we got one at the bottom here, a low body design that I call it, and a high body design, and I said, what if we just split the difference and put one dead center? Maybe find the balance point, put it dead on the center, because I found that red dead on the center was on the balance point of the big stem. So I fished them. The Avon float was horrible. I cast it out. It just had this helicopter thing. Line got all tangled up. It was just couldn't hardly use it. This one, cast really well. I loved it, loved it, loved it. But I couldn't fish the shallows because once again that cocking weight issue came in. You had to put, now that you have a bunch of weight down here, you got to have a whole lot more cocking weight to get it to stand up. And the same problem happens. Once you get it to stand up, it sinks almost all the way down there. So while it does cast better, it doesn't still have the float characteristics. And this is the last one of those original floats where I kind of put all three of these together in one. The rest of them I've lost. Some of them are broken here, like you see here. But this is the only one I have remaining of the original floats that I stumbled upon. And once I had lost all those floats, I said, man, I just really didn't think this one would work. I really did not think this little mid-body design would work all that well. And so what I did was, I said, well, what the heck, I want to fish anyway. I put them on there, I cast it out. I was amazed. The float hit the water. I needed only half the weight, cocking weight. And it just cocked right up and stood right on that balance point. And half the float was out of the water, half the float was below. Now I can fish the shallows. Okay, now I've got 9 inches of float above the water that I can see and cast long distances into there. And again, the balance point is on balance point right there. It's kind of windy, so it's going to fall out. I still have the, you know, got a little bit fancier with the decorative wraps here. It looks better. I got some, and then I found out that hey, I can actually put a swivel on this thing and just have quick connect, quick disconnect right there on the line, right there on the fishing lines. This is the only thing that's on the line, so I can take it off and just fish straight off the bottom if I want. Put that on, we're float fishing, and I find that this doesn't tangle as much. And so that's sort of the evolution or micro evolution of this design from the just primitive, just painted sticks held on with rubber bands to a slip bobber design that's quite cumbersome but actually really does work, to a slim design that just didn't float well, to combining all three of these elements into one bobber to find the proper positioning, thus making a very sensitive bobber for fishing. Now that's how I fish. This is all I fish with now, the longer ones. I make some shorter ones out of some scrap wood stems and stuff, but that is the evolution of that. Now, if you're interested in fishing with a sensitive bobber like this, sensitive slip float, you can adjust the depth and do all that, check out either my eBay page, or I can give you, I have a free download on my website on fishing these bobbers and making these bobbers for yourself, and I'll include those links down in the description or in the comments, and so you can go check those out, those free resources there, and let me know what you think. Or you can purchase these outright. Okay, and I have a special going now. If you want the free coupon, you know, send me an email, damon@blackwarriorlures.com. Type in catfish lures in the headline, catfish bobbers in the headline, catfish bobbers or catfish float in the headline, and I can give you a free shipping deal if you buy a dozen of these or more. Okay, now with that, happy fishing, good Christmas, you know, all that good stuff, and see you out in the water, and I'll talk to you guys later.